Hello, hello, hello. Gonna see how this microphone does. I think I'm loud enough to be captured by our online guests and participants. We certainly appreciate everyone coming today, in particular our distinguished panel. We'll get to some introductions here in just a moment, but I just want to thank everyone in the audience for coming. And there should be a wonderful young lady standing here before you, Miss Lily Harris, but she's not here today. She's feeling under the weather, feeling terribly, and she was in Atlanta at a student affairs event and got to feeling poorly. And she's made it back to town, so all is well. But I think she's still feeling junky and might be joining us online, it seems. So if we have any questions about the format or the structure, we'll certainly refer those to Miss Lily, but we appreciate her organizing this and getting everyone together back and forth again. Thank y'all for being a part of this, and thank all of y'all for being here. We've had a series of these events. Today, this one kind of focuses on people within the professoriate that are here, a part of academia, but with the first generation background and some of their experiences. I would encourage all of you that as you have questions, and I hope that this can certainly be more of a discussion format where if you have a question, just raise your hand. I have a handful of little questions once we get through the introductions that we can toss some questions out and just have y'all field those. But anytime you have any follow-up questions or anything that's just burning a hole in you that you have to get answered, feel free to reach out with those questions at any time. It absolutely is just a discussion format, and we encourage y'all's participation in that way. Let me start out with introductions of our guests. Dr. LaShawn Simpson Hendricks is an associate professor of biomedical engineering in the Department of Agriculture and Biological Engineering at Mississippi State. Before joining the faculty at MSU in 2013, she trained as a postdoctoral research associate at Rice in the Department of Bioengineering. Dr. LaShawn Hendricks received all her educational training at Clemson with a PhD in bioengineering. Her research interests include vascular calcification, smooth muscle cells, slow twitch, cell and gene therapy, and mechanotransduction. Wasn't sure I was going to be able to say that word. Ooh, don't ask me to spell it. Her work has been funded by NSF, NIH, USDA, and Mississippi State's Office of Research and Economic Development. In addition to her passion for all the research items, Dr. Hendricks is a student advocate and a champion for diversity and inclusion. She's worked to create inclusive spaces for trainee development and success. She's received numerous awards for her efforts, including the CALS Teacher of the Year in 2018 and a Bagley College of Engineering Distinguished Teacher, various additional awards from the IHL. So without any further ado, thank you, Dr. LaShawn Simpson. Dr. Jason Wallace. He serves as an assistant professor of higher education leadership in the Department of Counseling, Higher Education Leadership, and Educational Psychology and Foundations, chef. Who? Cooking What Matters at Mississippi State. As a former TRIO Student Support Services and McNair Scholar, Dr. Wallace is a proud first-generation college graduate, an accomplishment that he credits to his mother, Miss Shalise Wallace Vaughn. Prior to joining the professoriate, Dr. Wallace worked for nearly a decade in student affairs, primarily in multicultural services. His scholarship identifies and addresses issues of equity and inclusion in higher education, with emphasis on Black and first-generation college students. Dr. Wallace holds a PhD in education from the University of Georgia and a master's and bachelor's degree from Texas Christian University. Thank you, Dr. Wallace. Dr. Brittany Moore Henderson is a native of Pickens, Mississippi. She earned her Bachelor of Science degree in biology from Jackson State with a doctor in veterinary medicine from Mississippi State and the Master of Science in Veterinary Medical Science. Dr. Henderson is currently the director for the Office of Admissions and Student Affairs at Mississippi State University Veterinary School. She's also an assistant clinical professor in the Animal Health Center, which she provides veterinary clinical service while teaching veterinary and veterinary technology students. And that's a lot. I can't imagine how busy you are. The head of admissions and a vet, giddy up. Dr. Holly Seitz, Dr. Seitz, let's give her a hand. Dr. Holly Seitz is an associate professor in the Department of Communication, woo, which I struggle with. She also directs the Message Laboratory, a communication research laboratory at the MSU Social Science Research Center. Dr. Seitz holds a BA in communication from MSU, a master in public health from UAB, and a PhD in communication from the Annenberg School for Communication at the University of Pennsylvania. Her primary research areas are health communication, science communication, and message effects. Let's welcome Dr. Seitz. I'd also like to speak up and welcome Dr. Peter Ryan, who snuck in. He is our Dean of the Graduate School. Let's thank Dr. Ryan. And I appreciate his support of all this programming and getting everyone together and making sure that this is a good outreach for the professors and the students, and everybody's getting what they need. Let me just begin, pretty please, with some questions, and I'll toss them off to you. We do have an online group of students participating, and if you could, pretty please, just pass the microphone back and forth, speak into the microphone, and we'll make sure that if this is being recorded or if students online may have some questions, make sure that they can hear us. As a graduate student, as they spend a lot more time engaging with faculty, what is your advice for engaging and communicating with faculty? What are the benefits or challenges of faculty-student relationships in grad school? Who wants it?
All right. Thank you. I'm going to tackle the piece of it about best practices for communicating with and connecting with faculty members. And by the way, I should state everything here is my opinion. Take it with a grain of salt and triangulate among multiple sources to see if we all agree. One of the things that I think is a best practice for communicating with faculty members, whether they are professors who are teaching classes that you're taking, or it's your advisor or committee member, if you're pursuing a research degree, is to have a conversation as early as possible to find out what their preferences and expectations are related to communication. You will find that some people will not answer their phone, they want you to email. For some people, it's the complete opposite. Some people have different preferences for timing of communication and different expectations. And so having those conversations very early in your relationship with them will help to head off misunderstandings. And then the other piece of advice that I might offer for communicating is to set up expectations with an advisor or professor for when they want reports from you about your progress. This is something that I did not do very well as a graduate student. And looking back, I wish I had been proactive in giving reports on where I was in a project, maybe reporting on the data, providing a memo about how my project was going at more frequent intervals so that I was a little proactive in that approach and they could know that I was making good progress. I'll turn it over to you.
One thing that I would add on to it is I think sometimes we can be intimidated by our advisors. It's important for us to remember that they've majority of the time been where we are, and it's important for us to, like you said, set expectations early, like talk to your advisor, let them know who you are, and you all make sure that you all are on the same page about how you plan on communicating and so forth. And making sure that I guess it's a place where time that you can be vulnerable with that individual to let them know like what things that you're dealing with and what are your needs, that things that you need from them. Because I think that's one important thing sometimes that as graduate students, you can get what we call imposter syndrome. I think all of us have been there at some point in time. And it's very important that, we look for them for guidance to help us in any kind of way that they possibly can. And it's important for them to know the things that you're going through so they can assist. Because if they don't know, they can't help. So it's important that you communicate with them and let them know how things are going for you and what your needs are.
I will add from the perspective of you have to create your own community and seek out others to get what you need. So if your advisor may not be that person that, is they may be fulfilling the research need, but not the other needs, right? So be honest about what you need and what you don't know. There was a Forbes article a few years ago, maybe 21, that talked about most professors uh have parents that were professors and grew up in affluent neighborhoods. So as first gen students, most of us don't have that, obviously. And so you got to be honest about what you need and what you don't know. And if you don't get it from the first person, try someone else. I kind of created my own little community in grad school and had my advisors kind of scattered all over. I didn't depend on my research advisor.
Yeah, I retweet all of that. That sounds really good. One of the things that comes to mind for me is the challenges to speak to that piece of communicating with faculty, particularly as a first generation college student, is that research shows that first generation students exhibit low help seeking behavior. And so typically as first gen students, we have been resilient throughout our undergraduate career and maybe even at home. And so we are so used to doing things on our own, of figuring out on our own, that will not work in graduate school. And so finding, as was mentioned, finding folks who you can connect with, folks you can be extremely vulnerable with and ask those questions is going to be really important. And also just being mindful and efficient of faculty time is also really important. And so showing up with something, as Dr. Maddox, who's at the University of Maryland, always states, you have to show up with questions, show up ready to engage, even if you don't know what the questions to ask. Make sure that you are naming that in the beginning of the meeting. I am writing this thing called a dissertation and I have no idea where to even start. Say that, right? Because there's so many people in graduate school who have parents and relatives who have been to graduate school. A lot of times faculty will just assume that you know what you're doing, and that might not necessarily be the case. And so just being able to open up and be vulnerable in that way will be important.
Good answers. I would follow up on that last answer from the perspective of a busy professor, and I was never that busy. I was a medium professor, but professors have a lot dumped on their plates, as y'all all know. Do this, travel, concur, slate, blah, 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 a million different passwords. It gets old, and there's like, oh yeah, hey, I want to meet, and ask them, hey, professor, I know how busy you are. What would be a good time to meet? And then work into their busy schedule, because everybody's crazy busy. But again, I'd follow up with that, with what you said. I agree wholeheartedly. Yes, sir.
Peter Ryan. I'd just like to ask this question of the panel. If they found also engaging with their fellow peers in graduate school as also a source of communication and learning to navigate the ropes. I asked the question because I found that one of the most helpful avenues, along with confirming with the faculty and my major professor, but I found that working with colleagues and having a strong relationship with colleagues, not necessarily in your own program, but across campus, because writing a dissertation is writing a dissertation. stress-wise. Okay. Thank you.
All right, question number 2. Oh, yes, ma'am.
Sorry, I am in a non-thesis track, but at the same time, I have a hard time kind of reaching out to my advisor. How would you recommend I start that conversation? Or should I just also reach out to other universities as well? Because I know that I probably do need a lot more help.
So I'll start with Dr. Ryan's question. Absolutely. Your fellow graduate students are, I always tell my undergrads, these are going to be your colleagues later. So, get to know them, start to make connections. And so definitely graduate school, even more so, those will definitely be your colleagues. So creating community there and finding someone or some group, a student association or whatever, to kind of find what you need. And if you get in the group and you feel like you don't know, try one person and say, do you know how to do this? And then that just kind of starts the ripple. And so then before you know it, you got a group of people that are also trying to figure it out. But to your question about getting started, I like what Holly said about showing up prepared. So, and also reaching out. So send an email, say, I have these questions. Do you have a time to meet where we can discuss these and maybe any other questions? As much as you can show that you are prepared and you have put some foresight into it, I think they'll be more receptive to it.
Oh, we have some advice from the back of the room to copy the department head on the email. I was gonna say, maybe hold off, just try the first one. Gotcha. So I will go back to Dr. Ryan's question about the power of peers to be helpful. From personal experience in my graduate program, the students in the cohort right above or 2 years ahead of me, and then my own cohort were essential players in my success. When I think about needing statistical help, there is one kind soul who comes to my mind. I still adore this person to this day because he was so generous in helping the entire research team with statistical analysis, never expecting anything in return. There was no reason that he should have helped us, and yet he did. And I have so much respect and gratitude for him. When it came time to study for comprehensive exams, I was turning to other peers in the program who had been through the process. They shared how they prepared for that process. When it came time to do a dissertation proposal, I didn't know what that looked like. And I'm a person who needs a model to be able to envision what mine might become. And they shared their proposals, and that helped me figure out what it should look like. And I was able to use a similar format for mine. And so, yes, absolutely, Dr. Ryan, peers are such an important part of that social support process. And then I would counter it with a question. I think we as a panel may need to know more about the types of information or support that you need from your advisor, and maybe we can come up with some resources to help you figure out how best to get that.
I would say because because I a person who grew up in foster care, so I did not get any help from there. My foster parents didn't get really a college degree, neither, and I'm the first in terms of my siblings to get a college degree. And so everything is kind of overwhelming. I'm trying to find resources to help, but at times I run into a wall, as well as how best to pace myself throughout it all.
I'll provide just a couple of resources, one, and as well as advice. First Gen Docs, I'm gonna put a plug in for something I love. First Gen Docs is a Twitter site that is actually for first generation college students who are pursuing advanced degrees, and a lot of folks kind of just share information. These are first gen students from all over the nation. There are other spaces online, and so social media is terrible in a lot of ways, but also great in some other ways, right? In that there are Facebook groups and even communities around and group me and things of that nature that you can connect with, get plugged into, where you can find folks that are even outside of Mississippi State, outside of your program, to share resources with, to ask those questions that you may not feel comfortable asking in your current classroom setting or with your advisor. I would also say finding other people in your field, maybe that's other faculty at other institutions. I saw that you mentioned that earlier, who you feel comfortable with, who might share your identities, who might understand kind of your unique experience is going to be really important as you are looking to kind of build your own professional network and community. But my biggest piece of advice, kind of to retweet again what everybody else has said around finding that circle of folks, finding a group of people, even if it's just one person who you can be completely vulnerable with and ask those tough questions, is going to be critical. And that might not be someone in your program, that might be a staff member on campus, that might be the TRIO office, right? It can be anybody that really understands this graduate process, because to Dr. Ryan's point, the dissertation is a dissertation, the thesis is a thesis, no matter what field, right? We have little tweaks that we use that make it specific to our fields, but the stress, the hurdles are the same. The ways that we engage and kind of go about studying for those things are the same. And so finding other folks to connect with is going to be super important as you're thinking about kind of navigating the space.
I think what I'll just add on is one of the things that just by you being here today and asking that question, and I feel like all of probably majority of us in this room probably at some time has felt the way that you are feeling. And that's good, because actually we are able to provide you with that support that you need. So that's one of the things that I say, because I know I have been in that place before where, like, coming to veterinary school, I had no idea how to navigate that world. And I found my people, found my group, and that has kept me moving forward and being able to reach back and help others to do the same thing. So definitely you're in the right place, and definitely get that support that you need in this room.
Really like the in this room comment. Here's some really kind people that are giving of their time. Here's some peers and colleagues that are going through the same thing. Just look around, and it really matters to have a group that cares about your well-being and success. And again, credit for coming. Question number 2. Part of becoming a scholar includes publishing your research. Can you speak a little bit about best practices for the publication process, such as how to pick the right journal, best practices when preparing a manuscript, and so forth?
Jason's like, no, go ahead. We're all flying by the seat of our pants, folks. All right. So I have some strategies that I'd like to recommend. Part of this question was picking a journal. And so because we are currently situated in the library, I want to give a huge shout out to the subject matter librarians who serve as a wonderful source of information. If you've never sat down and had a conversation with the particular librarian who is assigned to your area, I recommend it because they're fantastic. And one of the things that you might ask for help doing is sifting through the many thousands of journal options if you are wanting to publish a journal article. And for my field, we, in my particular area, we typically publish journal articles rather than books. And so that's how I need to publish. Is that noise something we should attend to?
Nope.
Okay. So there are many different types of journals. Some of them are what we call predatory journals, where they may not have the highest reputation in the field. They may charge you exorbitant fees to publish, and that may not be a good return on investment for you. So you want to look out for those, and the librarians can help you sift through some of those options. There are other things to consider. You may want to talk to scholars in your field, advisor, for their opinions on how different journals will be viewed. There are some fields where there is the top of the top journal and you need to aim to publish in that. But there are also other journal options across other disciplines. I tend to do very interdisciplinary work. And so my work may be published in a communication journal or it may be published in an adjacent field. In some departments, if you're seeking an academic job later on, which some people in graduate study go on to do, you'll want to think about how you'd like to build your reputation, and journal choice may factor into that. Along the lines of preparing a manuscript, one tip that I got many years ago that I really liked, and so I like to pass it on, is once you've chosen that journal, pull at least 3 articles that are very similar in methodology or approach to how you like to write, and examine what they call the deep structure of that journal article. And that means looking at what sections are present, what type of content they cover in each section, and the approximate length of each section. And you're going to do that for 3 different articles and then compare across those 3 articles and kind of come up with what the commonalities are. And then when you sit down to write, because remember, I'm a person who likes models, I can say, oh, in this section, I need to make sure that I start out by addressing the health problem and what that is. And then I'm going to give this overview of where I'm going in this piece. And I know that that's how I'm going to structure my article. And that's been a really helpful process.
So for me, and I'm just speaking from STEM, I don't know about other disciplines, but each professional organization will typically have an associated journal that they publish. So that also corresponds with the conferences that we go to. So that's always a good start. I try to start there. And then also, as you are doing your literature, you will start to see a lot of the publications that you're pulling being in some of the same journals. So pointing them out as these are the journals that I want to target. I also love a good model, but for me, I'm a big picture kind of person. So I try to, with each article, make sure that I'm telling a story. So, what is the question we were trying to answer? And then, did these experiments answer that question? You know, what did we learn? And then, what's the next step? So, that is pretty much all you really have in a journal article with a lot of fluff added to it. So for me, once I have that big picture, you know, the story kind of laid out, then I fill in the literature review and materials and methods and all that, those pieces. So
Yeah, and I'll just add that one, that great question. I think that for me, that was the most intimidating part about being a doctoral student, was this idea of publishing. I had no idea, no landscape for what that even looked like, what that even meant. And so I started with the things that felt most accessible. In the social sciences, we often have journals that are specific to graduate students, which means that they will only publish things that are submitted by current graduate students. And so that is a great way to get some love and healthy feedback, right? As opposed to some of the toxic things that we see on the other side. But just to kind of get your feet wet into publishing, what this might mean for you, what this might look like. So my first journal article was in a graduate journal as a graduate student. I'll also say that for folks who may not be comfortable or ready to dive down the empirical work or conceptual work, book reviews are a really great way to kind of ease your way into publishing, because we've probably done that since maybe even high school, right? Reading a book, writing a review on what that book meant for you and what that might mean for the field at large, things like that. And so that was another way to easily get a quick journal article, was by reviewing a book and putting on my own thoughts into that and submitting that into a journal. And so lastly thing I'll say is just partnership is really important. One of the things that was important for me was to find someone who'd already published before and to serve as a second or a third author on their piece. And so that way I was able to see the process, again, have someone to kind of hold my hand as we were going through that. And it was a little bit less intimidating as I thought about like kind of entering into that field. And so, yeah, I just think that's a phenomenal question, because it can be one of the more daunting things about graduate studies.
And just to even go back a step further, manuscripts are the currency of scientific research. So you need those. The research you're doing, you need to document that this was official, it was peer reviewed, it's repeatable, it's something to put out into the literature so everyone knows what you did. It's a very important nugget of a professional job. So it's not just something that you do at the tail end, it's what we do. So I remember there was a Vance Watson. I know there's one guy in the audience that remembers him, but he would go on and on and on about it is scientific currency. So you need that, and everything that you're doing in grad school should fit into some publications to document what you did. I didn't know that when I was sitting in these seats that you're sitting in. I kind of got to that at the end of my project, but it was crystal clear at that point. And luckily, we'd done some decent research along the way, and it was published. Dr. Ryan.
There are other forms of scholarly work, not just publishing journal articles and books. There is the creative arts. And so their scholarly work, for example, in music, is music performances. And for art is for art displays. For horticulture, flower arrangement is doing a display for the White House, which one of our faculty has the reputation for doing that. So for those in the humanities, especially the fine arts area, I don't want them to feel that they have to write or review a book, which they could, but also scholarly work is a very broad terminology, and I don't want those folks in those disciplines to feel that they're out in left field because they're not writing a physics paper on how to split the atom.
Next question. All grad students are looking forward to that final milestone, finishing their thesis or dissertation. What is your advice to navigating the graduate school environment during the thesis and dissertation process, such as how to choose the right advisor, picking the dissertation committee, staying on track with research and writing, and any other stuff you may think of along that critical process?
Um, that's a tough one. That's a mouthful. That's a lot. So choosing the right advisor, very important. And as much as I want to give advice on like how to go about choosing the right advisor and make sure, there's a personal fit and all that stuff, sometimes you don't really have those options. You got to choose from what you got. So as much as you can choose the lesser of two evils, try your best. But then from there, we don't have those here, right? Then from there, you have to make it work for you. So I remember being in a situation, I had a traumatic experience in graduate school. And so, like I said before, you got to create your own community. So I was able to look to other professors to sort of help me in those areas where I wasn't getting the help that I needed from my advisor. And then when I got ready to pick my committee, I sort of was able to choose my mentors that were helping me in the other areas as part of my committee, right? So they could be there with me. So typically in your committee, you have like 4 people. So be persistent that you would like to at least choose one of your committee members you want to choose yourself. For the most part, it's a process that you and your advisor kind of discuss on your own, but make sure that you choose someone that you know will be your voice in the room, will defend you in the room as much as possible. The writing process is just get through it. Just power through it as much as you can. I will say, and I hope this doesn't rain on anyone's parade, I remember graduation being very anticlimactic. Even the defense, it was like I finished and they said I passed, and I just wanted to fall out on the floor. Like I didn't even want to celebrate. It was like, just let me go to bed, please. So, so yes, but pace yourself, set milestones for yourself. And I always try to set treats for myself in the process. So, once I get my lit review done, I'm going to book a spa day, or once I get chapter 2 finished, I'm going to do happy hour with my friends. So, any way that you can break it up and sort of fill in little happies for yourself, try to do that.
The things I add on to that, because all good things. Definitely, for me, writing a thesis, it was difficult. And I think the library got very tired of me because Terry, she's the best. She helped me quite a bit. And one of the things that I know that also helped was definitely having that community individual who's gone through the process. I had a lot of friends who had completed their thesis, had defended, so they could help me like navigate how to finish that thesis and then get to the defense. Because the defense is a whole different level as well too. And having someone in the room, like somebody on your committee that, can be that person that kind of assuring you to help, because you can feel like when you're in your defense, like things are not going well. You can really feel that way. And then once they say you have passed, you're like, literally, you don't even care about graduation anymore. You just like, I'm done and I don't want to look back at this anymore. And this is a person that recently finished a master's not too long ago. So I kind of can remember how I was feeling through that particular time. But definitely having someone in your corner who, you kind of can like rely on, that can help you. It's going to tell you all the things, not going to tell you that with the things that you want to hear. It's going to be just truthful and honest with you at that time, because that's going to, only thing that's going to do is just help you throughout the process, because navigating through that thesis is definitely difficult, but it can be done. You just have to pretty much, have the sprint to just continue on and knowing that you're going to get to the end.
So I'll try to touch on choosing advisor and committee, and then also making progress on your written work. I feel fortunate to have had a really good experience with a PhD advisor. And I know that's not always the case, but if you are able to choose, ideally you're looking for intellectual fit and also interpersonal fit. And usually it's someone who's really doing the type of work that you would like to do, and they're set up to guide you in that way. So, in my program, I was doing help communication, and I had two really good options. And, one was doing more experimental work, which is what I wanted to do. And that was ultimately part of why I chose him. So intellectually, that was a match. For the interpersonal piece and other parts of fit, sometimes it helps to talk to other graduate students who have been that person's advisee. And they can often tell you about things like availability or their working style. You can get some really good insights from fellow graduate students to help you as you make that decision. And then typically when you're putting together your committee, you might be choosing people who have other intellectual viewpoints who can kind of flesh out the committee and provide the resources and the support that you need in those areas. Could also be that, maybe you're bringing in someone else who's going to be good moral support for you and going to be an advocate for you. My personal advice on the committee is to keep it no bigger than it has to be, because you start to run into scheduling difficulties. So that's just a practical logistical issue. I've struggled to find a time for a defense because we were all off at very different conferences. And it can help if you can put together a committee where the people have either worked together successfully before, or at least there's no known animosity among them. That's going to be really good. So just things to think about as you put together that committee, because you don't want them to be so divergent in views that it becomes a roadblock to your success. And then when it comes to making progress on, a dissertation or a thesis, the only thing I can go back to is my personal experience. And my advisor, I was actually leaving Philadelphia to move here. I had a new baby and I had just defended my dissertation proposal. And he said, work on your dissertation every day. And at the time, that felt really daunting. But other than, I want to say, Christmas Day, maybe, or Thanksgiving, I did something on my dissertation every single day. It may have only been 15, 30 minutes because I had a new baby at home and I was with her, but I did make progress every day. Sometimes the only thing you feel like doing is formatting your citations, or downloading an article and making a few notes on it. But I did make progress every day, and eventually I got it done. Once you get to the proposal stage, you propose it, and as long as you do what you said you were going to do, typically things work out okay, at least in my experience.
Yeah, the only thing that I would add is what is the saying? Perfection is the enemy of good or progress. Yeah. Uh, Turn stuff in, right? Your advisor is there to help you, but they can't help you if they don't have pages from you. And so a lot of the times, particularly in first generation college students, imposter phenomenon starts to show up, particularly at the dissertation phase, because you've done classes and turning in things before. Pretty much since kindergarten, right? You've done that process, but the dissertation is a completely different beast. The thesis might be a completely different beast because you are on your own. And so I would sit with writing for weeks, and that does not get me progress. And what I learned as I was dissertating is that if I just turn something in, my advisor will tell me exactly what to do because they're going to give you feedback. But so many people don't turn those things in. They just sit on that writing. And so making sure that you are constantly getting feedback from folks. And of course, that varies with your advisor. Your advisor may not be as available, but finding peers, even finding other people on your committee, use your committee. They're not just there for namesake. They're there to actually guide you through that process. And so, definitely just turn this is not going to be your life's work more than likely. It will not be your best writing, but it will be done writing, and you will be doctor or you will have your master's degree, right? And so making sure that you are continually making that progress is the most important part, because then you'll get to the good work once you have the title.
Excellent. Yes, ma'am. Yes.
So again, as a first gen, don't know. There's an opportunity to ask. So you talk about the importance of putting a committee together, but what is the role of the committee?
I kind of said under my breath, nothing or everything. Um, so I guess technically the committee is to be sort of an advisory committee for you. So you would have your major advisor, and then depending on your department, and I love Holly's advice, no bigger than it should. If they say three, three. Don't add another one. Because that's just another opinion and it could throw you off. But if your advisor has expertise in, first gen students, but you are looking at women, you may want someone who is that your project? Yeah. Right, yeah. So you may want someone maybe from gender studies, or someone who specializes in, does research on, in women. Let's say you're doing rural first gen women. You may want a third person to have rural experience, right? So you kind of set the table so that you kind of span the gamut. So someone on your committee will have expertise in all the things that you're doing. And then also, but when it comes for your proposal, they will give feedback in terms of you're on the right track and you need to add A, B, or C, or you started this, but this isn't working, but you need to go back and revisit that, that kind of thing. And then basically just to evaluate you at the dissertation phase. And I said nothing or everything, because you can't have some committee members that are like, cool, if the advisor says it's good, I'm good, I'll sign. And then you have some that want to prove their worth. And they can be hindrance for you. So find out who they are and don't choose them.
That's a great answer. And I'm gonna back up what Dr. Seitz said. Look at the recent graduates and where they've landed. Have they gotten professorial jobs? Have they gone on to work at the co-op? Have they, I don't know if it's big jobs, little jobs, the people who just have student after student who just drift away. Don't select that person. And of course, at Mississippi State, we don't have many of those, but they're sneaking around out there. We haven't quite weeded them out yet. But you can look, the proof is in the pudding of where they're placing their students. That's the proof. And you can ask, again, with the good suggestions of asking who are good committee members, who knows about statistics, who's willing to meet and rearrange their schedule to reach out to the students. I really like those answers. I'd follow up with a question of my own here, the Brian Henry question. We have some really driven groups of students. It always blows my mind how intense and how they hold themselves accountable and goals and driven. How do the four of y'all find time to relax and to make time for yourself with hobbies or outsides or ball games or what is it? How do you find that peace to go and do for you?
You let us time graduate student
Sure.
So I was a full-time graduate student with an assistantship. So for me, it's bad. It's TV. And it's mostly just to decompress and just escape into something else, a form of escapism. So having my different TV shows right now, it's Hallmark Christmas movie season. So that's what I'm doing. They started mid-October. That's what I've been doing every night. And my dog, so I have a little Shih Tzu, and when I get home, all he wants is for me to sit so he can sit in my lap. So he kind of forces me to be still. Sometimes I want to, be all over the place doing this, and he gives me the side eye. So then I know I need to sit down and kind of let him, relax. I'm also a list maker. I live by my list. So each day having a certain number of things, I have a big picture list and then like today list. And so I keep my today list short. And once I cross those out and I feel accomplished, then I may try to tap into the overall weekly list. But for the most part, I try to keep it small and just forcing myself to have that downtime, because otherwise I can't function.
So for me, when I completed my master's, I was working full time. So as a veterinarian doing a residency. And now I'm in a PhD program and I'm working full time. So when you ask the question of what downtime time is for me, that pretty much is it. I have two little girls at home and four kids and a husband. So they get, I guess, the rest of my time pretty much. The time that I do have, once I get home after class or after an event. So that's a work in progress, I have to tell myself. So, but yes, it is a bit different from like being a full-time grad student versus working and going through grad school.
Definitely hear that. When I was in graduate school, I was in school full time with a research assistantship. And I knew myself going in that the very first thing I would drop when things got busy would be physical activity, that I would just stop going to the gym. And so I designed my commute around making sure that I walked. And so I took a train into Center City, Philadelphia, and it let me off. And instead of transferring to the other train, I would walk a mile and a half to school and then a mile and a half back, so that I never had to go to the gym. I just walked, and it kind of kept me healthy, because I find that taking care of physiological needs, while it sounds so basic, is one of the things that can help protect your mental and physical health. So try to figure out how you're going to prioritize some sleep, how you're going to get out into nature and move your body, how you're going to fuel your body on those tough days, and how you're going to build a social support network to help support your mental health. So that's key. I will say that once I started my faculty position, I was kind of in your boat. I didn't have a lot of extra capacity for relaxation, for the things that were really important to me, like being, engaged in the community, having deep friendships. All of that just kind of got pruned away in those, like, because I had a young child at home, I was starting a tenure track job. And so a lot of that fell to the wayside, and I've had to work to build that back in as I learned how to manage things, as I got things, bless you, got things started up, got my research started up, learned how to teach classes and started building my repertoire of classes. And so those are the things that now I'm trying to get back in. And I think during the pandemic, we all kind of learned the value of protecting our mental health. And that was when I really started prioritizing my little morning walk. And some days it gets carved down to like 10 or 15 minutes. But I go back to not letting perfect be the enemy of the good. And I say the 10 or 15-minute walk I do is better than the one I don't do. And so we're just making it happen a day at the time and trying to build in the things that are going to help us relax and protect our health for the long term.
And I actually went to school full time while working full time for the first 3 years of my program. My last year, I went full time and worked part time. And that's just because bills were still coming. And so I needed to work. And work was paying for school. And so and I knew that I wanted to be out in a certain number of years. I knew I had 4 years in me, and then I was ready to be done with school. And so, self-care was not a priority for me like it should have been, particularly in those 3 years that I was working full-time, but I paid for that significantly, mentally and physically, by not taking care of myself. So definitely echoing the physiological needs, that is important. It's going to keep you well. One thing that was also really important for me when I was able to disconnect, and when I did disconnect, was connecting with my friends who had no idea about the doctoral journey, because they were a relief, a mental relief. They don't ask you questions about the doctoral journey because they don't know anything that you're doing. Or going home to my mom and she's not concerned, how's school going? That was the only question I would get, right? And so it helped me to fully disconnect in that space, because any other time I was around either colleagues who were in higher education or my cohort mates. And so you're constantly going, your brain's constantly going, even when you don't necessarily want it to be. And so finding spaces that I could be the Jason and not Jason on the way to Dr. Wallace, right? Trying to do that was really important for me. And also get therapy and getting a dog were life changing. And so get a dog, and and if you have the means to go to therapy, I think that's also just really important, to be able to process what you're going through with someone who again is looking for the outside in, doesn't understand the landscape, and can really kind of make this a big picture for you, right? This is, at the end of the day, this is school, and you have a whole life outside of that. And so you have to be well beyond that degree, or else that degree was not worth it, right? And so making sure that you are just kind of engaging in those own self-care practices is going to be really important.
That's really wonderful advice from all four panelists. That's kind of, we're approaching the end of this. We've got a few additional moments. If any of y'all might have some burning questions additionally, I could certainly walk out with the microphone and hand it over. Anybody got any kind of residual questions you might want to ask? Thank you. I've forgotten about WebEx. Think find a network and a core group of buddies and people with whom you can interact. Pick the right professor to the best of your ability, and if there are just one or two available, good luck. And then look after yourself. I think you have to really look after yourselves and find people that care about you and connect with family and dogs and buddies and spouses and children. Do what you do and look after yourself, because you're no good to anyone if you're just grinding yourself to a pulp. You're more important than that. And I think we've got some really successful people here that could attest to that. I just really want to thank everyone for their time today and thank all of y'all for making the time to be here and be a part of this. With that, I'll conclude and just thank y'all all for coming. Please feel free to get goodies. Man, good answers. Golly. Man, I'm like, I feel inspired. I'm ready to go. I'm like, hell yeah, you couldn't answer those questions any better. It's every single person at this school that's in graduate school would benefit from hearing this today.